Level X Pokemon were unique in that they could level up Pokemon of the same name to give them a new host of abilities on top of their previous ones, as well as a slight health boost. So in this video, we'll be going over the best Pokemon with this mechanic. And at 10th place is one of the most unique Pokemon ever printed on a card, Porygon-Z Lv.X. This card does not have a single attack printed on it, but instead features two different Pokepowers on it, showing the unique way Level X can work, since they are still able to use any attack of their non-level up version. Mode Crash can be used when this card gets put into play and discards any kind of special energy attached to your opponent's Pokemon, something that wasn't particularly useful back when it was around, but still a nice additional option nevertheless. This card's second Pokepower is where things get interesting. Decode allows a player to pick any two cards from the deck and place them on top, making them easily accessible with any kind of draw card. And then the best part is, you can use it every single turn, turning every Porygon-Z deck into an insanely consistent build. Its uniqueness and power to get the player any card in a format where powerful draw cards were scarce is what gets Porygon-Z Lv.X its number 10 spot. And at number 9, we have Magnezone Lv.X, a card that heavily benefited from multiple good Magnezone cards being available to it, but also having an incredibly useful ability. Electric Trans allows you to move lightning or metal energies from any of your Pokemon to a different one, as often as you'd like. This card's Cyber Shock attack deals 80 damage and paralyzes your opponent's active Pokemon at the mandatory cost of discarding 1 metal and 1 lightning energy from Magnezone Lv.X. Paralysis in the Pokemon TCG renders a Pokemon useless because that Pokemon can't retreat or attack for a full cycle of turns. These two parts already make this card a solid attacker and utility provider, but it gets even better when you take a look at Magnezone's cards that it is able to utilize. When Magnezone Lv.X was first released in Legends Awakened, it only had access to Magnezone from Diamond and Pearl, which provided free retreat to any Pokemon that had at least 1 metal energy attached to it with its magnetized Pokebody. Its attack Metal Blast dealt 50 damage, plus an additional 10 for each metal energy attached to it. This made for a rough start of Magnezone Lv.X's playability, but that would quickly change when Stormfront was released. Stormfront immediately brought 2 new Magnezones to the game, who both carried useful attacks and Pokepowers. The Metal-type Magnezone allows you to gain access to your energies with its Pokepower Magnetic Search, to grab either a lightning or metal energy to your hand. The most commonly used Magnezone at the time, however, was lightning-type Magnezone from the same set, as it provided consistent energy acceleration, which became especially powerful with Magnezone Lv.X's power to move them around. Super Connectivity attaches a lightning or metal energy to your active Pokemon at the cost of 1 damage counter that would be placed on the Pokemon that would receive the energy. Keeping in mind that with 2 Magnezones, this Pokepower would be able to be used twice, which meant that Magnezone Lv.X could paralyze your opponent's active Pokemon every turn, without ever requiring a hand attachment. But Magnezone didn't just provide an amazing Pokepower, it also came with a useful attack. Gyro Ball dealt 60 damage and gave the player the option to switch both active Pokemon with a bench one, giving the respective player the choice of what to promote. For a long time, these options were all that Magnezone decks were using, until Triumphant, where the most powerful card for the deck was released. Magnezone Prime came with an incredibly consistent Pokepower, Magnetic Draw, that let the player draw until they had 6 cards in hand, as well as the powerful attack Lost Burn that put any number of energies attached to any of your Pokemon into the Lost Zone and dealt 50 damage for each of them. Cards that enter the Lost Zone are removed from play for the rest of the game. Funnily enough, by the time this card was released, so much time had passed that Magnezone Lv.X and Magnezone Prime were equal in HP, getting rid of the Lv.X function of providing extra HP. While it was never the best deck in any of its formats, Magnezone was certainly one of the most creative and solid archetypes that deserves its spot on this list. And at number 8 is a card that played a key role in the most unique archetype that has ever been printed in the Pokemon TCG, Arceus Lv.X. Arceus expansion in the Platinum era of the Pokemon TCG featured, who would have guessed it, a bunch of Arceus cards, creating a unique deck with many different attackers. What made the Arceus deck so unique is that there was no limitation on the amount of Arceus cards that you could put into your deck, getting rid of the usual amount of 4 copies per deck. This meant the archetype would not have to decide on which types of Arceus cards to bring, but could actually play all of them. In addition to a regular Arceus card for every type, they also received 3 different Arceus Lv.X cards. All of them were colorless, but shared the Pokebody multi-type, which changed their type to one of the cards that they had evolved from, allowing you to pick which type would be best suited for the matchup. On top of that, the version that made it onto this list had a second Pokebody called Omniscient, which made it possible for it to use any attack from any other Arceus in play, as long as the correct energies were attached to it. This provided the deck with a lot of different options and made it one of the most interesting decks to ever exist. Gengar Lv.X is another card that heavily benefited from being able to access multiple different good Gengar cards, putting it at 7th place on this list. In a game that was heavily dominated by level X Pokemon, this card's level down Pokepower was a great offensive tool to secure easier knockouts. This Pokepower would allow the player to pick one of their opponent's level X Pokemon and shovel the level up card back into their deck. Gengar Lv.X's attacks also isn't anything to scoff at. For the heavy cost of 3 energies, Compound Pain put 30 damage onto every opposing Pokemon that already had 80 damage counters on it. This worked especially well with Gengar from Arceus that could move 1 damage counter from one opponent's Pokemon to another one once per turn with its Curse Pokepower. The Shadow Skip attack also helped with setting up multiple Pokemon by dealing 60 damage to the active Pokemon and putting 10 damage on a bench Pokemon that your opponent controlled. Gengar from Storefront was a bit dated when Level.X came out, but the combination of these 2 cards breathed new life into it. Fainting Spell was one of the best Pokepowers at the time, flipping a coin when this card would be knocked out and taking the attacker with it if the coin landed heads. Shadow Room was another attack that Gengar could access to put damage counters on your opponent's side, placing 3 damage counters on any Pokemon, or twice as much of the Pokemon the damage would be on had a Pokepower. And lastly, as if Gengar Level.X didn't already have enough great options to evolve from, is Gengar Prime from Triumphant, which once again carried another attack that would set up damage counters. Curse Drop placed 4 damage counters on the opposing side in any way the player liked, making it an ideal tool to set up multiple Pokemon at once for Compound Pain. All of these attack options and an already great card itself put Gengar Level.X amongst the best cards at the time and onto this list. 6th place goes to the oldest card on this list, Gardevoir Level.X, released in Secret Wonders, one of the first Diamond and Pearl expansions. This card brought some utility to an already powerful archetype with its Teleportation Pokepower. Teleportation switched Gardevoir Level.X with one of your bench Pokemon if it was active, or your active Pokemon if it was still on the bench. Its Bring Down attack was not a focus point, but still provided some niche uses by knocking out the Pokemon in play with the lowest amount of HP remaining. It's important to keep in mind that this attack does not specify that it has to be an opposing Pokemon, meaning you could knock out your own Pokemon as well. The attack's main use was to finish off Pokemon that were previously in the active spot but has since been switched out or retreated. Secret Wonders also brought a regular Gardevoir card that some players still consider to have been the most dominant deck ever in the history of the game. The Telepass Pokepower was able to copy a supporter card from your opponent's discard pile, offering a second use of a supporter card every turn to the Gardevoir player. The Pokepower was so powerful that it specifies in its card text that only 1 Telepass Pokepower could be used per turn. Gardevoir's attack Psychic Lock was the focus point of the deck, dealing 60 damage, which was enough to knock out most Pokemon in 2 hits, and prevented your opponent from using any Pokepowers during the next turn, heavily limiting what kind of options were available to the locked player. Gardevoir Level.X was a great addition to the deck that ended up winning the 2008 World Championship. In 5th place we've got Regigigas Lv.X, a powerhouse with a unique strategy. This card's Sacrifice Pokepower is incredibly powerful if it's used correctly. At the cost of knocking out one of your own Pokemon, it attached 2 basic energy cards of Regigigas from the discard pile and removed 8 damage counters from it, providing a way to set up Regigigas Lv.X, and it also kept it alive at the same time. The Pokemon that were knocked out were usually support Pokemon that had already fulfilled their purpose, freeing up bench space for other uses. The card's Giga Blaster was also a large reason for its spot on this list. For the high amount of 4 energies, Giga Blaster did 100 damage, discarded the top card of their deck, and one of their cards in their hand. It also prevented Regigigas Lv.X from using its attack next turn, which was fine as the regular Regigigas still provided some useful attacks. Dragoff did 30 damage with the option to switch to defending Pokemon with the bench one before doing damage, and Giga Hammer did 80 damage, plus it couldn't be used on the next turn, just like Giga Blaster. The goal for Regigigas decks was simple but effective. Set up 1 big Regigigas Lv.X and keep it alive by sacrificing support Pokemon that would either help the player draw cards or disrupt your opponent. This unique playstyle and Regigigas sheer power make it an easy addition to this list. And at number 4, we have Flygon Lv.X from Rising Rivals. This card's Pokebody Wind Erosion discard the top card of your opponent's deck between each turn, making it possible to get rid of some of their key resources by chance, while using Flygon Lv.X to attack with. Extreme Attack was an incredible tool to take care of opposing Lv.X, dealing 150 damage to them no matter if they were the active or on the bench. This card and its previous stages were a key pillar of many decks across the time due to their colorless typing and helping them gain different attackers, and also some utility thanks to Flygon's Rainbow Float Pokebody, which gave free retreat to any Pokemon that shared the type with an energy that was attached to Flygon itself. One of the most successful strategies, however, didn't involve attacking with either of the 2 Flygons, but instead made use of the Poketool card Memory Berry, which allowed a Pokemon to use any attack of a previous stage, even the basic. The attacker of choice was Trapinch from Secret Wonders that could use either its attack Inviting Trap to switch a bench Pokemon with the opposing active Pokemon, or Sand Tomb to deal 10 damage and prevent the Pokemon from retreating. This, in combination with Flygon Lv.X's Wind Erosion Pokebody, meant that the deck would be able to slowly chip away the top card of your opponent's deck each turn until they eventually run out of cards. This is one of the first ever mill/control decks that use a different strategy than the common practices of taking 6 prize cards. Its inclusion in many top and rogue decks alike made Flygon Lv.X a very popular card at the time, giving it a well-deserved 4th place. And at number 3, we have Garchomp C Lv.X. Healing Breath was an amazing Pokepower that allowed the player, upon evolving Garchomp C, to heal all damage from any SP Pokemon they had in play, making it very hard for decks that weren't able to knock out SP attackers in one hit. Garchomp C Lv.X wasn't just a utility tool, it also was one of the best attackers the deck had to offer. Its Dragon Rush attack dealt 80 damage to any Pokemon at the cost of discarding 2 energies, something that became very easy once it gained access to double colorless energy in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, fulfilling the entire cost with only 1 special energy. This, in combination with Energy Gain, an SP Pokemon specific tool card that removed 1 colorless cost from any attack of the SP Pokemon it was attached to, made it a powerful and energy efficient threat to most decks. Up until double colorless energy was released, this card was mainly used for its Pokepower, or powered up with Bronzong G's Galactic Switch Pokepower that allowed the player to move an energy from SP Pokemon to another Pokemon by putting 10 damage onto Bronzong G. One way to gain access to multiple energies at once during the time was Upper Energy from Rising Rivals. It worked just like double colorless energy as long as the player using it had taken fewer prize cards than their opponent. This was a solid option at the time, but became obsolete when double colorless energy entered the game. Ever since Garchomp C Lv.X was printed, it was part of some of the best decks, being solidified by its World Championship win in 2010. To honor its legacy, Pokemon even gave it a spot in their 25th anniversary set celebrations. And at number 2 in this list, it might be surprising to some people, especially after featuring so many great attacking options in the last couple of entries. And that of course is Uxie Lv.X, which doesn't earn its spot by being a strong attacking threat, but thanks to its additional consistency that it provides. The card's trade-off Pokepower lets the player take a look at the top 2 cards of the deck and put one into their hand, while the other one would be put at the bottom. Being able to use this Pokepower once every turn helped decks a lot to gain extra cards and get closer to enabling their strategies. A large part of its utility was also played by Uxie and its Setup Pokepower. Setup let the player draw cards until they had 7 cards in their hand when Uxie was in play, making it a staple in most decks thanks to its amazing draw power. Even nowadays, cards aren't given abilities as powerful as Setup. Crobat V, for example, only draws up to 6 cards, can only be used once per turn, and gives up 2 easy prize cards if it's knocked out, due to its V rule. This would make Uxie an incredibly powerful card even in today's meta, showing why the combination of Uxie and Uxie Lv.X gets a very well-deserved second place on this list. And at number 1, we have Luxray GL Lv.X. With its Bright Look Pokepower, the player can switch one of their opponent's bench Pokemon with their active one. Gusting has always been an important part of the Pokemon TCG, and the combination of this powerful Pokepower with cards from the SP archetype like Poketurn, which picks up an SP Pokemon and all cards attached to it, this would make it possible to reuse Bright Look by allowing the player to evolve another Luxray GL that was already in play, or wait another turn to evolve the one that was placed back into the player's hand. Similar Pokepowers or abilities have been reprinted since, and all of them have seen play. Cards like Lycanroc GX and Umbreon VMAX had high impacts on their metagames, even with other item or support cards around that fulfilled similar purposes. Luxray had none of these to compete with, making it the only reliable option to force your opponent into switching out their active Pokemon with the Pokemon of your choice. But this wasn't everything good about Luxray GL Lv.X. What might not seem like a lot nowadays, being able to quickly deal 60 damage with its Flash Impact attack was a useful option to knock out low HP Pokemon, or set up knockouts for future turns. Once again, the SP engine played a big role in that by allowing this card to be used for 1 less energy by attaching the Energy Gain tool card to it, which reduced the attack cost of the SP Pokemon it was attached to by 1. Even at the time, Luxray GL Lv.X was considered the most powerful Lv.X card by many, solidified by its 2 World Championship wins in 2009 and 2010. Just like Garchomp C Lv.X, it got an honorary printing Pokemon's 25th anniversary set celebrations. Alright, and that's the list. If you know of any other good cards I may have missed, or have ideas for future videos just like this one, I'd love to hear about them down in the comments, as we do actually compile them into more future videos.